Stargazer Lily, you asked for it and it is here. Such a cool name, Stargazer Lily. I love that. So before we get started, I have put a link to the drawing of this in the description. So what you can do is you can print it off, and you can, there's a couple of different ways. I mean, if you can draw it on and you want to follow it that way, obviously that's fine. But if you are looking for a way to trace it, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can, and I will catch up with the painting, I promise, but you can use it by putting the drawing, once you print it out, I would maybe take a marker and go over the line so you can see it better, but then you can also put it up against a window to have light coming through so you could trace it. So you can use carbon paper. If you have an iPad or like a whatever compatible to an iPad is, you can put the drawing over the iPad and use, or put your paper over the iPad and use the light from it to make a trace. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, leave comments. I will definitely explain it. But the idea is to trace it, and it's going to be exactly what I drew here, so it'll give you a great template of how I'm going to paint this. So with that said, once you have that drawn, come back here, and what we're doing is wet on wet. And if you're not really sure what the difference is between wet on wet and wet on dry, I also have a video that I went through and talked about that. So I will link that below. But in short, if you don't want to bother with that, I basically take water and I'm going to basically paint on the petals with just the water first. And then I add a drop of the pink at the base, kind of where I am right now. And when I add the drop of the pink, it spreads. And then I just helped it spread a little bit. And then once it spread, I added a darker, I put purple here, but I didn't love the purple, so I ended up switching it to a red and a brown mixed together because I like the red and brown better. I think it looked a little bit more accurate. So don't do the purple. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't do what I'm doing. Do the red and the brown. I actually do the red and the brown for the rest of the petals. And the reason red and brown is because the red is a little bit more vibrant. We don't want a red there. We want it to be a deeper color, basically like the depths of the petal, if that makes sense. And then basically what I'm doing, I just realized I say basically a lot. Let's see if I can go the rest of the video without saying it. So I almost said it again. So here I'm adding the little dots. I know that's not what they're called in real life. I don't know the parts of a flower, even though I've looked it up a million times. It's that part. And the key to painting the Stargazer Lily accurately is, well, two things I would definitely keep in mind as you're painting this is they have that white edge to the petals. And I think I've seen a lot of people try to paint this, and what they do is they actually try to paint the whites. So what is going to happen now is you're going to practice restraint. This is going to be a very good practice because if you can master this will help your painting skills immensely. Is don't touch where the white is supposed to be. Use the paper, and that's what we're going to be doing here. So the pinks that I'm adding and the lines that I have drawn are actually just the pink parts. And when you see the drawing, you will see that it basically, I said basically again. When I listen to this again, I bet you all find more. So what you're going to be doing is creating an imaginary line where the white is and using the natural paper to create that white edge of the petals. So you can't quite see that yet, but you will towards the end. So I always kind of recommend watching the video first before diving in, because sometimes it helps to see the finished product and what I'm talking about before actually painting it. And that's why I try to keep these videos under 20 minutes. This one's a little over 20 minutes, but that's why I try to keep them under 20 minutes so that you don't get so bored watching them over and over again. And then the second time you watch it, pause it as you're going along, and then it'll be easier to do. So here is where I'm adding a little bit of that reddish brown to the base, and I did like that a lot better. And the base of the petal, so when the petals come together, it's darker in the middle because it has a lot more shadows, it's a lot more deep, and then the petals itself also has a natural darkness to the center. So that's what we're painting, and then we're just painting the pink part. And then you'll notice I leave a little bit of a gap there with the whites, with the paper. That's the edge of the petal. And so I'm definitely avoiding going right up to the edge. And the other good reason to do that is because we don't want the colors to bleed into each other as well. So 2 reasons to do that. The main reason is we want to keep that natural white edge to the petal. And the drawing that I did, when you're coloring it in with the paints, you do want to go up to the line that I drew because that's the pink part of the petals. I think I said that already, but I just wanted to make sure it's clarified. It's the Stargazer lily, I think, is one of the hardest flowers to paint because of the white edge. Because they're, I don't know, it just seems like it's, I've been asked quite a few times to do this. This one's a little bit, I would say, a little bit more on the advanced side of painting. So if you find yourself getting frustrated with it a bit, then don't. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. What I'm trying to say is this is a little bit more advanced. So it might take a couple of times to really figure this out, but I would keep trying this tutorial if you don't get it the first time, because it will be rewarding once you do. And I'm going to do probably another one in the near future where it's a little bit looser watercolor, less structured. It's going to not look as realistic. But if you do find yourself like this is not really working out, then I will definitely do one that's a little bit looser and easier to do. But because people were asking how to paint this, I really wanted to give it a go with the more detailed. So here I'm adding, so another thing to keep in mind is always start with a very light wash. So basically a very watered down color, because you can add to it, but you can't take away. I mean, you can take away to an extent, but not as much as you want. And by adding to it, then you feel a little bit more confident. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm adding more of the, it's like a darker pink. I wasn't really liking the light pink. It looked like a body part. You just didn't want it to look like a body part. So I'm adding a little bit more darker. I'm adding a little bit definitely darker to the depths of the petal. And then I'm going to brush it out just a little bit because the white parts of the petal also have a touch of pink here and there. So I'm going to do that to all of these petals. And I kind of skipped ahead, but I did do wet on wet here. I just kind of skipped over the part where I was just painting water because that's kind of boring to watch. So this one, and if you have different color petals, like this one's a little bit darker, that's okay because it's kind of below the other ones. I do lighten it a bit, and the way that I lighten it is I take my brush, I clean it and dry it, and then I use my brush to lift off the colors around the edges of the petal, like you're seeing right here. So this is just one of those things. Play with it. You're probably not going to follow this exactly because you want to get your petals the way you're comfortable with. So that might be adding more pinks here, adding more browns there, whatever it is. Just don't put on globs of paint first. Just try to just add light layer through light layer through light layer. So the Stargazer lily do have this dark line. It's almost like, it looks like a vein, but well, I guess it is kind of a vein. It looks like a vein going down the middle of the petal, and I drew that in there, and I'm adding just a little bit more of the darkness now just to give it that depth, and that's what's really going to make the flower pop. So now I'm adding these dots again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of the dots over onto the white part of the petal too, because that'll help with the illusion that the petal is further out than what you're seeing with the pink. once you add the leaves in this, then you're really going to start seeing that difference. We're going to be like, oh yeah, that I can see what you're talking about. Especially when I add this green leaf on the right, you're going to be like, oh, it makes sense now, if it hadn't already made sense. So this is just, I'm using a picture kind of as a guide. What I've noticed with Stargazer lilies is these little freckles they vary from lily to lily. Some of them have tons, some of them don't have very many at all. So if you want to add a bunch like I am, go ahead. If you don't like it that much, then don't. You know, it doesn't have to look exactly like my flower. And the white in the middle is going to be the green stem. I also noticed that some of these Stargazer lilies have all that inside part. If you ever have these in your house, I love having these in my house because they smell so good. But if you ever have these in your house, they have that little yellow pollen at the end of the stems. I know it's not a stem, and that stuff sheds like crazy. One of these florists at the store I went to and bought it, she taught me a trick. She said, take a little piece of toilet paper and just wipe that off, and then you don't have to worry about it. So I do that when I get these, and then I don't have pollen all over my table when they start to kind of wilt a little bit. But they do smell amazing. And as you can see here, I've added a little bit of the dots to the white part. And you can see the white gaps in between the petals. That's where the edge is. And I know I keep talking about the white part. It's just because I really want to focus on that being a big part of how these flowers come to. So is using the paper. So now I added green. I added yellow to the green to make it a little bit more dull, and then the tips of the petals I'm adding the green because the flower that I'm using as a guide did have the green, and I'm using that. And now you can see that the petal goes to the tip there, and then at the very tip I'll add also a little touch of brown because that's what the flower was doing. So I'm just adding a little bit here and there, and now you can see what I'm talking about. You can almost visualize the white part of the petal without having to paint it, if that makes sense. And that's kind of the magic ticket to this flower. So this is where people are like, oh, look at that, that's kind of cool. I hate saying that because it's my own painting, but I'm talking about the craft, not my work. And I apologize in advance for my nails. They've been giving me a very hard time lately, so don't judge me on my nails today. I usually have them perfectly manicured because I'm obsessed with doing them, but I just have not had the time. So this is, again, just adding the green tips to the end. Some are darker than the others. I've added just a little bit to the sides there. I didn't love it. I'm wiping it up. So if you find yourself doing that and you're like, oh, how come I don't like how that turns out, and then people look at my paintings and they're like, oh, but yours turned out perfectly. No, it did not. It never turns out perfectly. It never turns out exactly how I wanted it to. So if you find yourself feeling that way and you think that other artists don't go through that, then hopefully this reassures you that I am definitely not always loving the way things are turning out. But sometimes I roll with it and it turns out better, or I figured something out that I liked. So I did add a little bit of the brown to the ends, like I said, and now I'm doing the green in the middle, and I'm going to add also browns to kind of give it the depth so that it's really, you want it to be really kind of darker in the center of the flower. And then you can trace around the green with the brown to make the stems pop a little bit. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm making it darkest right in the middle. And I'm going to spread it to make the stems pronounced a little bit. And don't get too caught up in this part because it's easy to get caught up and then it ends up looking muddy. So once you get it down, just walk away from that part of it and finish the rest of the flower, and then you'll get an idea if you want to add more in the end, which I did add a little bit more in the end. And now I'm like, oh, I want to give it a little bit more depth here and adding a little bit more brown. And then we're going to be doing the leaf part. The leaf. It's just a leaf. It's not a leaf part. So hopefully this is making sense. If you painted this, I would love to hear feedback. What did you love? Did you figure something out? Did something here help you? Do you feel better about it? Are you thinking this is a horrible experience? Just let me know, because I will read through all the comments and I will definitely try to help out as much as I can. As much as you can in a text, right? So here I'm doing the leaf, and as you can see, I did leave quite a big gap between the leaf and that one petal. And once this is finished here, you'll see what I'm talking about with the difference. I'm not going around that one stem because it's still a little wet. There's no reason for that except that it's wet and I don't want it to bleed into it. So I wait until it's dry and then I fill in that part around that stem at the end there. But the leaf, I do leave a pretty decent gap there, see? And now you can see what I'm talking about with that white edge of the petal. If you need to maybe sketch that green part of it out first, feel free to, if you don't trust your judgment on the invisible line. And then I take my brush, it's dry here, I clean it and dry it, and I just draw some lines through it. I didn't really give the effect I was going for, so it's up to you if you want to do it or not. It ended up spreading. I didn't care. I was like, I could have easily have gone without doing that and it would have been fine. So up to you if you want to try it or not. And I'm adding another leaf here. But now that I added that one leaf, now you can see what I'm talking about with that white edge of the petal. So if you want to make it even thicker, then go ahead. The Stargazer lily, the petals are a little bit more narrow than a lot of them are. I've noticed that too. Like some of them have really narrow petals, some of them have wider petals, some of them have bright deep pinks, some of them have lighter pinks. So, you know, this is one of those that you just go ahead and make it the color that you want. With leaves, so you don't ever want it to be a perfect green. Add some browns to it, because leaves, you know, you do have leaves. You can see them sometimes that they're these beautiful bright green, but especially with the lilies, they tend not to be. So they do tend to have a little bit of brown at the tips. So I would add a little bit more browns to the tips, maybe pull up some of the green with a dry brush. I'm doing the stems here, and in hindsight, I don't know why I did that stem. It doesn't look flush with that petal, and I didn't really notice it until I was doing this video. So if I were to go back, I don't know if you can even see it, I would probably make that stem look a little bit more, I don't know, it just doesn't look straight to me, and it's really bugging me, but it's done, so I can't fix it right now. So I'm adding more of the green, darker green to the top there where the petal bends, so you can see a little bit more of the shadow. And here I'm like, I'm going to try it with the green lines instead, and I liked it a little bit better, so I added it to the other one. I still don't love it, but I think it looks better than it did before. So this is now, let's see, I said I was going to go fill that in a little bit later. That's what I'm doing there, just because it dried up. Now I can do that. And I'm going to now this is the time that you look at it and you go, okay, what do I need to add to it? And if you need to do that the day after, go ahead. If you need to do that right now, whatever, I'm adding a little bit where I'm like, okay, I need to fill this in a little bit. So you're adding your little touches here and there that you think it needs it. And then I'm going to add a little bit more brown and a little bit more dots to, I was looking at the flower, I'm like, there's a lot in the base there. And I do add the dots to the white part because that's the petal too. So if you don't add dots to the white part, then you kind of lose that effect that you're going for. So definitely add it to your white side of the flower. And then that kind of helps create that illusion that it's not paper there, that is the petal. Does that make sense? I'm like really repeating myself today. I'm starting to annoy myself. But it is what it is. I often annoy myself. So then I think I add a little bit more brown to the base of the leaves. And that's pretty much it. How are you guys? Are you guys doing okay? Hopefully you are. This flower makes me happy. It wasn't until I walked away from it and looked at it hours later that I liked it. I didn't like it when I finished it. I was like, yeah, this isn't really turning out the way I wanted it to. And then I walked away, and in a few hours I came back. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And you're like, thanks, Tina. Thanks for giving us your flower that you didn't love. I did like it in the end. I was going to add another flower, a closed lily, on the top left there. You can kind of tell that it's missing something. I just couldn't be bothered with it. I was done. I was like, I don't want to do this. I was done. You know, I might add it later. I'm not going to add it later. Once I'm done, I walk away from things. There's a million things I want to paint. I'm not going to come back to this. I'm adding a little bit more pinks to the edge. I think it came out pretty good. What do you guys think? Please let me know how yours turns out. I hope you try it. I hope you love the experience. If not, I apologize. If you do, then great. But definitely leave me a comment. I don't think I said basically too many more times, but I noticed I said definitely a million times. So I think I'm compensating. I'll work on it. I'll try to be less annoying. But definitely, oh, there it is again. Leave a comment. Let me know your experience. Do you love the lily? Is there another flower you'd like to paint? If you need help, email me, tinawilliamsart@gmail.com. I'm happy to try to help with your painting. My goal is for you guys to enjoy the process and to love it. did you see me? I was staring at it. I'm like, do I need to add something? I should have walked away. I need to take my own advice. But leave a comment. If you found value in this, please subscribe to the channel and share it, because I'd love for others to get a hold of these free art lessons and, expand the world of art. Have a lovely lily day.